Welcome again to this post-worship conversation with Reverend Ray, and also I'm RJ. I want to start by thanking Heather for her eloquent sermon on helping us understand why we need to be rooted in our community. But I want to start with this question. Talked about your supervisor, and his name was Eun Sung, and I have to ask, was he a Korean American?
He is. He actually right now is a chaplain down in Richmond. And for fun, he likes to do surfing, but like not surfing in the waves, skimboarding, that's what it's called. He was great. Yes, a Korean.
No. Okay. Now, I had never heard of him. That too, we don't all know each other, even though Methodists can be very small and a Korean American circle can be, but that's interesting to hear.
Yeah, he really nice guy. Wouldn't have assumed that you knew him, but he was so just formative in my spiritual walk. And even today he also like does meditation on the side, leads meditation on the side. So if you're on TikTok, he's on there too, and you can follow him, and he leads little meditations on TikTok.
Oh,
But
wow.
speaking of him, I did one of the questions that came to me post worship was what was the name of the place that I was saying in DC? And it's L'Arche, L apostrophe capital ARCHE, and it means the ark in French. So people weren't sure like what I was saying. They were trying to figure out what word. So it was French. And the community was founded by Jean Vanier in France. And so that's why it has a French name. But it was really a wonderful place to be. I served there in the greater Washington, DC L'Arche community and in L'Arche Blue Ridge Mountains after college for about 6 months, or after divinity school for 6 months. So
So
yeah.
it's an intentional community, right?
Yeah, and it's worldwide. There's yeah, different communities all over the United States, all over the world, in India and in France and Canada, a lot of different places. Brazil, I think there's a community. So yeah.
But I believe that your sermon was not challenging us to build that intentional community among here, but it
No.
was really building more of an environment where we can be transformed with the presence of one another, right?
Absolutely. And I think that community is powerful, and that transformation happened there a little bit more quickly than it could in other places just because we lived together, we shared life together. It was a very intense community in that way. But what I wanted everyone to take away from it is that growth that I experienced there, I truly think can happen any place where we are intentionally coming together for growth, for spiritual growth, checking in on ourselves, asking, setting goals for our spiritual life. We set fitness goals, we set household goals. Like, I believe that you should have goals and hopes for your spiritual life that you're working towards. And it's always helpful to have, and really good to have, companions as you do that.
That actually reminded me of my formation. Um, Now, I do believe that there are ways that this can be structured, but I
Mhm.
also believe that it can come organically. And for me, my biggest formation is when I was asked to serve as a youth volunteer before I entered into seminary. And what we had is we formed this group among the youth teachers. We were all in a similar age. And someone said, hey, you know what? We're gathering together to do mission and serve, but we also need to gather together to grow in faith. So he had actually initiated a time for us to meet on a regular basis, whether it was like, it could have been a small group, but it was really more, hey, we're going to go out and eat. So let's come together. Like he would ask us to ride bikes. And so I would, have bike with him. There would be times where we'll be just sitting on a bench and talking and sharing thoughts for hours and hours. And for me, even though it was not like structured, I think there was that intention of one person wanting to invite me at the time in this journey. And I think that whether it is structured or whether it's organic, if we have that intentionality, to really encourage each other to grow in faith. That is when the community is formed and born.
Yeah, because I can think of in my life the intentional places, like I have been in an intentional spiritual formation group where we have read a certain book and have a very patterned way that we talk to each other and interact with each other, and growth has happened there. But then even in just our clergy groups, I think of we often just share a meal together and then have kind of space in the ways that people have said, I'll say, oh, I'm feeling really depleted right now, like ministry is just a lot. And it's normally Josh King will say, well, when was the last time you spent time in prayer? And it's always helpful, you think sometimes I think we believe that our spiritual disciplines come so naturally and so easily, but it's not. Sometimes I need, at least for me, I really need other people to check in on me and be like, hey, how are you doing? Are you doing that? Is that maybe why you're feeling a certain way? So it, I don't know how you could walk this faith journey without being in community.
Yeah, and that's where accountability happens, and that's accountability that was practiced through our form of classes and bands. And I really appreciate how you had raised, especially made that tie to the Stone Church. We are one of the first Methodist societies, and even though we have the date of 1766 as our deeded start of the building, there must have been groups who were gathering before the Stone Church was built. And these group of people came with one goal, that we want to grow in faith. And what they did is they used this method of meeting together. And society can be, it's not really like worship, but it's really more like a weekly gathering of all these people that has a form of worship. And then class meetings are similar to our Sunday school, or I would say more like a life group, because they necessarily didn't teach Bible during the class meetings. It was really more accountability of our soul. So the first question that they would ask is, how is it with your soul?
Such a
Like
good
not how was your week, not how are you doing, how is your business, how are your children doing, is really how is it with your soul? And is my soul connected to Christ was the main question that they asked. And they actually did something else that not that many people like to hear is, but the accountability was, if you are connected and you're committed to follow Christ, how did your life align to it by asking this question? How did you use your money this week? So they were actually asking, like kind of getting into the business of other people, of what they use and what they spend their money, because they had saw that where we spend our money is where we have our hearts. And that's very intense, but that was something that they did. And this whole concept of class is how we can be accountable, how we can be intentional with the growth in our faith with one another.
Yeah, and I think that it can be really intense to hear the ways that they did that, but I think that the growth that happened in those spaces, and it can easily translate to what we're doing here. And sometimes I think, yeah, like I said, we hear those things and we think, wow, that's really intense. I don't know if I could ever get there with a group of people, but you can. And if you have, like I said in this sermon, that vulnerability and that openness and that trust, we're not asking you to be vulnerable with the whole church. We're not going to stand you up in front of everyone and, tell us how your soul is doing. But when you find that small group of people that you can do that with, I cannot tell you, just I would love for everyone to experience the growth that comes with those groups. And so it's so lovely for me to know that this is our heritage, both just as a United Methodist as a whole, but like really knowing that our church grew out of a community that was committed to worship and each other and missions. And one of my favorite things is, and you'll have to ask me about it sometime, but you can go back and look at the class meeting attendance rosters for our congregation and see, like, they mark different things on what's going on within the class meeting, who was attending, who hadn't attended. Sometimes they would vote people out. If you had said that you were going to commit to this and then you had so many absences, they said, doesn't look like you're that committed, like out you go. And so you can kind of see some of those records, but it does feel intense, and it is in some ways, but this is it should be such an important part of our lives. It should be the most important part of our lives. And so it needs to be taken seriously.
Taken seriously, I think that's a good way to say it. Is that they were very serious about it, and because they were committed, that is how they grew, and naturally, it grew beyond themselves. I did want to share this. I think just uh, I believe that in our church there were a lot of these relationships that were already in place. However, down the road, whether it was life circumstances that changed, whether it was COVID that we know that changed a lot of our lives, somehow some of them might have started to fall into the cracks. So what we are doing right now is not something new. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to encourage us, not not in a right now, I think we're too early to start anything structural, but I think it's just really giving awareness of finding ways how we can intentionally be more intentional in building a community together.
Yep.
Um, Go ahead.
And I would say, if you're feeling that desire after the sermons this week or after this chat, and you're not exactly sure where to turn, to reach out to RJ or myself, and we can start a conversation. Let's talk. Let's pray about it and see where that might be leading for you. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really a blank sheet of paper at this
Mhm.
moment. It could be like I said, it could be reviving one of the things that we already have. It could be starting something completely new. Uh, some of the I know some of the groups might say we already have a mission, and this is where we come together. This is where we grow. I am all for that. However, can we add an intentional aspect of growth on that group?
Mhm.
That's just some of the things that we will kind of wrestle, we'll brainstorm, we'll try. And I always like the word we will still try and sometimes fail. Someone, we had a conversation today. Someone said, let's instead of using fail, let's use pivot, right? Then we'll try something and we'll pivot and pivot, and it keeps on reminding me of Ross and
Friends.
Friends. But
Yeah. Uh-huh.
right? We will pivot, but it's really more of how can we build an intentional accountability among our community so we can grow as we are rooted in this commitment of following God.
Yep. Sounds like a good place to end for today.
Exactly. So that's something that we would just ask you to pray for. I would just ask you as you are praying and remembering us in being a community, and I'm going to use that word rhythm, starting a rhythm of making sure that we are rooted in worship, rooted in community, rooted in mission. I also want you to add a prayer about this podcast thing. Is this something that we should kind of dig deep in, or it should be just something that we do momentarily, temporarily during this time of talking about rooted? Let us know your thoughts.
Hmm. Yeah. Let us know what you think.
I know if we want to go further deep down, we'll have to kind of be a little bit more serious about this and be more strategical.
Yeah.
So that's my thought post worship. Thank you again for tuning in. Thank you, Reverend Heather, for leading us in worship and to the word today.
Yep. You're more than welcome. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.